Hi, everybody. Welcome to Gallery Talks. This is our first of 3 weeks of Gallery Talks. So, of course, we have some technical issues that we're ironing out. Walt announced that start time at 6:45 to 7:45, which makes it difficult for the concerts. We had originally announced at 6:30 to 7:30, which is much better for the events that follow us. So we're having a little miscommunication about our start time. We're talking tonight with our two-dimensional artists and also about the business of making art with Kelsey Wales, Mandy Chappell, and Wayne Werner. I've introduced the theme as always, uh, and we will expound on this for the next couple of weeks as we investigate the difference between sheltering in place and migrating in place. A lot of the news broadcasts have indicated that we should continue to shelter in place and be wary about going out. Various states have different views about that as we deal with the pandemic. I think that sheltering in place has a protective element to it, as if we're keeping the world away. It's a turning in, but it's kind of a trepidatious and fearful turning in. I like the idea of migrating in place because migrations are active things. And for artists who've had this tremendous gift of time, we've migrated in place, which means we're actively moving within ourselves and creating things. We are communicators. We're putting voice and image to what others can't quite picture, can't quite communicate. And many of us have had very rich studio time during the last couple of months. Mandy's a teacher. She's been working online. I teach at the college. I had to teach online. Some people have been employed, some artists have been employed, some not. So you may have a different feel about sheltering versus migrating within yourself and how that may have affected your creativity and your creative output. Wayne may address the dilemma that those of us in business for ourselves as artists are facing in this difficult time as he talks about the various facets of being self-employed and being an artist in business. Do you think we should begin? Carol, what's your feeling?
Yes, I think we can begin.
All right, our first artist tonight is teaching quite a popular class, and she's extremely gifted in the art of drawing, painting, creating creatures. Multi-talented Kelsey Wales this year has concentrated on colored pencil drawing, and it's something that's attracted quite a bit of attention from our audience. Many people would feel afraid to pick up paintbrush and face a blank canvas, but they're more comfortable picking up a pencil and dealing with paper. And I think for that reason, Kelsey's attracted quite a nice audience. And her class, of course, began today. Tell us about your class and what you're doing. Show us what you do, which is really amazing.
Hello, like Linda said, I'm Kelsey Wales, and I'm teaching colored pencils. So the nice thing about colored pencils is that most people at some point in their life have had some experience in using them, whether it's been in a school situation growing up or they're working with colored pencils with their kids. It's a really easy to access medium, and if you make a mistake, generally it's not the end of the world because it's done with colored pencils. You can get a new piece of paper and start again. So what my class has been doing mostly today is that they've learned a bunch of different techniques and what they can do with colored pencils from different kinds of blending and layering and stuff like that. And we're exploring how can we take a colorful stick made of wax and clay rub it on some paper and convince the viewer that we are making successful textures that we can understand and read as viewers. So we've started to get into that, and as we go through the week, we'll explore about more of what we can do with those things. So I've got just a quick little PowerPoint slideshow of some of the stuff that I've been doing like the past week or two with colored pencils and the different sort of techniques therein. So I'm going to screen share and do that real quick. So one moment, please. Oh, hey, that's me. All right. So hopefully this is correct. Here, let me do the presentation. There we go. Colored pencil illustration. That's my class. So there's me drawing. So I do a lot of illustrations for science fiction and books and stuff. So this is me last summer, back when I had glasses, working on a Good Omens movie style poster. So I've got colored pencils and I'm sketching away, and that was very fun to do. I've been using colored pencils since I was about 14 when I got my first big set of them for my birthday that year. And I still have many of those pencils. These things just, they last forever. And assuming you don't use them to their tiny little nub, they will last a very long time. So they're long lasting, they're inexpensive, and they're incredibly versatile. So one of the things that we're doing a lot in class is that we are talking about how we can scritch and scratch on paper, layer over layer of coloring with different lines, with different pressures to create a sense of color and lighting and depth and stuff like that. So there's a close-up shot of me making lots of little lines to give someone some sort of colorful stubble. Way more colorful than it is in real life, but it makes it for a more interesting drawing. One of the things that we learn is that colored pencils are such a versatile medium because the ingredients that make them up are largely things like wax and pigment and clay. And when you put them on paper, you're creating a new surface to draw on. So if you want something like a bright highlight or something that gives you more contrast, you can very easily paint over colored pencil. Like I do in the picture here, there's some white paint and there's some sort of pink and red paint on there. You're not painting on paper anymore, you're painting on this new smooth surface that you've created with your colored pencils. And what makes that even more user-friendly and less intimidating is that if you decide that you don't like what you've done or you've made a mistake, you don't need to wash it off of a piece of paper or erase it off of a piece of paper. You take your fingernail and you scratch it off of the colored pencil. And it's very, very simple and forgiving in that sense. And that makes this a medium that is less daunting to people, which is great. Because you don't want to feel this pressure to be very good at something the very first time you do it. And colored pencils allow you to experiment and play and do things like that. So this is a close-up shot here of some armor on a picture, and there's colored pencil and there's paint on there and there's actually some Sharpie-like markers, and you can blend all that stuff together to get a really interesting and vibrant piece of artwork, which is fun. Because you can layer and draw on top of different things over and over again, it allows you to play around with color and saturation to make a really vibrant and fun piece of artwork. So this is something I did for Doctor Who a couple years ago. This person is not this color naturally, but it still works as a portrait because the colors, even though they're very vibrant and almost silly, they make a little bit of sense and it doesn't feel too out of place. So just some other stuff I've done. There's a Freddie Mercury commission I did. There's paint splattered in the background. My students are going to learn how to do that. How do you make a mess with paint and have fun with it, but not get it on your drawing? Spoiler alert, I'm not telling you right now. You have to take the class. So some of the things I've been doing while we've been sort of at home is I've been doing a lot of miniature portraits of people who have been influential in film and television and music and who have, through their performances, brought people together, which is especially important now as so many of us are far away from the things and the people that we love. So this was Orlando Jones, who is a terrific actor. He was recently in American Gods, so I had drawn this and I had sent it to him. And I'll be sending him the original one later on when I can get to the print shop. So Anthony Bourdain brought people together with food and cool stories, and people telling stories is how people get through hard times. So I drew this earlier this last week, not realizing that it was also his birthday last week, a couple days after I drew this. So this is done with the techniques that we will learn in class, and maybe people will end up drawing something at the end of the week of someone who has impacted their life in a good way. This is done with watercolor too. Watercolor does not fight with colored pencils. Again, he brought people together with his music. I think everyone on the planet has heard his rendition of Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and it is the most heartwarming and wonderful cover of a song maybe ever done by any human being ever. And then there's, of course, like fantasy, fun sci-fi movies like Black Panther is a really awesome Marvel movie, and I had drawn this because I wanted an excuse to draw her amazing costume. That is pretty much why I decided to do that. But people come together to watch movies together. In fact, later on this evening, I'm going to be watching movies via Zoom with my friends as a way for us to hang out. So art is fun. Colored pencils are user-friendly. They give you a lot of chances to explore and play. And through that, you get to tell stories, explore new things, and just sort of have fun with what you're doing. So that's about what I got. I hope people are going to enjoy the class. I hope people are going to enjoy telling stories as we're drawing and find ways to use this new medium or maybe a less familiar medium to bring people together. So that's what I got.
Thank you very much, Kelsey. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
You have a very colorful life.
I try. Thank you.
And hopefully you're encouraging everyone to be brave and make their life a little more colorful through their art.
Absolutely. Art should be colorful and messy, and so should your life.
And as we stay at home, it's wonderful to have a creative outlet where time just disappears and you're completely immersed in your work. And I think the experimental nature of your mixed media looks so cohesive and together in your final product. But as an artist, you're very brave and confident because you're good at it. And I'm sure that you'll bring that confidence and bravery out in your students as they attempt things, because the next time they attempt something, they're going to be a little more courageous and they're going to have all these different techniques to choose from in their arsenal of techniques.
I hope so. I mean, you learn how to do things through playing, and I'm still learning things 16 years after doing this. So I hope that's true.
I'm playing every day in the new studio I set up, and that's the most fun, being spontaneous.
Oh, wonderful.
Amanda Chappelle is working from a very ancient tradition in Pisanki. It's a borderless tradition. It encompasses many countries in Northern and Central Europe. And as she's been teaching with us and also researching her personal heritage, she's been investigating more about the art form and the beautiful patterns, but also the mythology involved with Pisanki. Mandy, would you like to share your knowledge with us?
I was muted. Yes, thanks, Linda. So my heritage is Ukrainian and Slavic, and that is what originally sparked my interest in Pisanki. Pisanki, in that term, typically describes the art from Ukraine, but like Linda said, there are so many variations that span a huge area from parts of Germany all the way across Europe. So you can find this type of art just about anywhere. And what I love about it is that it starts with a simple egg, which is just a blank canvas. And throughout history, the egg has symbolized rebirth and a new beginning and a new start. And because of that, even when this art began, this tradition began far back pre-Christianity, thousands of years ago, they had that same idea and that same hope. And there were often symbols that were put onto the eggs that had specific meanings that would help to present someone with a specific power, or the egg was imbued with some sort of force through the design and the color that was chosen by the artist. For example, women who were not fertile, couldn't have children, would often be gifted an egg with the symbol of a chicken because it was considered to be a very fertile animal. So that was thought to help that woman along her journey to motherhood. Fires were also huge problems for communities. And so eggs would be decorated and actually walked around the perimeter of a fire in the hopes that it would stop that evil force and protect the people. So these eggs were very, very important for a lot of reasons because of their magical powers. With the harvest, I don't know if I have an egg specifically with a wheat design, but for the harvest, eggs would be decorated and planted in the field along with the crop. And that would ensure a successful harvest for everybody. So if we take all of those ideas and put them into our pasanque today, perhaps we'll be able to send some more of these magical forces into the world and help to solve all of the problems that we're encountering this year. I'm kidding, in jest, but it's fun to think about. As time progressed and Christianity took over, a lot of the pagan symbols that were involved were incorporated with the Christian ones. So some of the symbols, like the 8-pointed star that symbolized the sun originally, were then taken to symbolize God or Jesus or things like that. So I love the way that the art has evolved from traditional designs into creations today that are much more, incorporate much more of a personal touch and deviate a little bit from those traditional designs, adding that personal flair and spark. So one of the things that I love most about this art form is the process. And I know that Kelsey talked a little bit about that with her colored pencils and the different techniques that you can explore. And I absolutely love that about this art form. I find it relaxing, but invigorating at the same time to be able to play and explore. So to give you a little bit of background, this art is done in a batik method. I often hear people say that they like to paint eggs, and some traditions and some cultures do just that. You'll find wooden eggs that are painted, or eggs that are blown out in the same style and painted with a paintbrush. These eggs are traditionally decorated raw. Typically, I blow them out for the safety of my home and everybody around me. But they are done with a batik method, which means that the dyes are layered in stages over top of each other. And there's a wax resist that we use to protect certain colors in certain places. So this egg that I've started already has a lot of white sealed into it. And we use beeswax and a simple candle flame, which makes this a very accessible form of art for a lot of people. Just like Kelsey with the colored pencils, this is something that is really fun to pick up, and it doesn't require much knowledge or skill or technique beforehand. It's something that you can learn along the way as you go with some experimentation. So we use a tool called a kistka, which is a metal funnel to hold the heat, and beeswax inside the funnel. This is a traditional kistka. You heat it over the flame, And I usually try to make a few strokes first to make sure it's at the right temperature. And then you literally just draw on the egg. And I'm super shaky right now, so I'm not gonna do too much. But just to give you an idea of how that works. So I'm gonna share my screen with you and talk a little bit about some of the other designs for just a few minutes. Oops. Let me see. Sorry. There we go. Can everybody see it? You guys good? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you guys for confirming. So here's a close-up of the setup that we would use. Like I said, very simple, and some dies. And from that, you can create an endless number of designs. So here are some close-ups of the stages that an egg would take. You would wax certain parts of it, and typically we would submerge the egg entirely in the next dye and the next color. I chose here to paint on some dye into a certain spot and then seal it with wax. And you can kind of tell here that in the second picture that the wax has covered that blue, just so that I could get a specific shade of green that I was looking for this design. And in the last image, you'll see that I wiped away some of the wax, and you can see the design sort of emerging with this particular egg here. So it's very fun at the final stage to be able to see your design come to life. It's just a close-up of some of the eggs that I had on display so that you can see them. And you can see a lot of the eggs use traditional colors, which would be yellow, orange, green, red, and black. But then there are some variants to that as well. Again, another close-up. Most of the eggs that I use are chicken eggs because they're easily accessible, but occasionally I come across a goose egg or a duck egg, which are also fun to decorate. And here are the same eggs, but grouped so that you can take a look at the patterns and the motifs. So the two eggs at the bottom are both done in the style called 40 triangles, which is a very traditional pattern. But as you can see from just those two examples, can be interpreted in many different ways and different colors and different patterns. There are actually 48 triangles in that pattern for those of you that are counting. And then the patterns at the top, to me, the eggs look substantially different, but they are all done with the same very basic egg division that allows you to maintain that geometry and that symmetry as you're preparing your eggs. So that's something that I'm going to be teaching my class tomorrow, how to divide the egg so that you can achieve those geometric patterns. And all of the eggs that I do are done without any type of measurement. I don't use any ruler or measuring device. They're all done completely freehand. So just to show that that's possible. There are some artists that do measure and they can achieve far more accuracy. But I think it's very cool that using some basic geometry, you can create those designs on this round surface. So it's an interesting challenge. So were there any questions? I think that's about all I've got for right now.
Thank you, Mandy. That was wonderful. Geometry does have quite a bit to do with the beginning of your pattern making. And then you can bring in natural motifs like flowers and weather, celestial orbs, and all kinds of things to change up the basic 48 pattern. It's amazing the variety that you can get.
I can share one more. I can share one more brief legend if I have just a moment. it's my favorite and perhaps fitting for the times. Um, this is a legend from the Hutzul region in the Carpathian Mountains, and it says that there is a giant creature, giant monster, that embodies all evil, and he is chained to a cliff somewhere in the world. And every year, advocates of this monster or creature travel the world far and wide to determine how many pasanque are produced throughout the world. And they take a careful count. And if the count of pasanque that are created is low and dips low, then the chains on that creature actually loosen and more evil is permitted to flood into the world. However, if the advocates go out in search of the pasanque and they find that many people are practicing this custom and this craft, then the chains will actually tighten on the creature of evil and hold him fast to the mountain and the cliff so that love can spread through the world and rule once again. So just one more reason to look into my class or maybe take up the art of pasanque while we're all sheltered at home. Spread that love, create pasanque.
I love that story. I think the count must have been really low this year because there's so much evil afoot in the world. If everybody did one pasanque egg, maybe we could make it disappear. Thank you for sharing your tradition with us.
Thank you.
We're moving from the actual production of art. Wayne Werner is third generation metalsmith and jeweler, and he earns his living doing that. Since he has so much experience, he has designed a class and participated in panel discussions and other things like that about the business of making art. Part of that business, of course, is how to connect with an audience that wants to buy what you make. And that is a pervasive problem in today's world for every artist. Common ground artists are no exception. Musicians, dancers, poets, writers of all kinds, as well as visual artists and craftsmen, have had a lot of difficulty connecting with their audience. And part of that is we're hands-on people. Many people are being forced to migrate from an analog, in-person world to a digital world. And that's a real challenge, especially to those of us who are like me, the oldest living teenager in Carroll County. I suffer a little bit from dyslexia. I have a sequencing issue, and it makes the digital world even more challenging. So Wayne is going to address a lot of those issues about taking art out of the hands of the artist and getting it, the business of art, getting it to an audience who appreciates and will support us in our work. Wayne Werner.
Well, hi, everybody. I've enjoyed the presentations up till now. Now it's just me, and I heard this a million times, but thanks, Linda, for doing this. This is always a rewarding part of the week to have a window into other artisans, the way they work, the way they think, and the way they manipulate in a world where, we're attempting to profit from our passion, so to speak. And yeah, the rules continue to change all the time. So the original name of this workshop was "You're Already Famous, Now How Do You Make Some Money?" Which I thought that was really interesting statement. It was a statement that a really well-known artist made to me, and she said, "Well, I'm already famous. How do I make some money?" And I thought it was funny, but not funny, because it's kind of a real issue. So back in the day, I thought being an artist was going to be some surreal, experience or a surreal job. And once I, started applying to shows, buying material, spending all this time and energy making art to sell, I remember it was a real epiphany that you know, the fun and games were kind of off the table, and it was not a surreal job, but you know, a very real job. And so this workshop kind of tries to shed some light on some things that we need to kind of have in our you know, bag of tricks, so to speak. And one of the things that we do is go through a little worksheet on process and artist statement and short bio. So it's kind of, you know, those three things, they all tie in together, but there's something that are always asked of myself and, you know, my girlfriend Barbara when we do shows, to have these things in our booth, or if we're sending work to a gallery, they want them on their wall, things like that. So that's one of the things we sort of shine a spotlight on. The other thing I like to do, I have another little worksheet, and it says, you know, what I cost me to be an artist. And it has things like, you know, supplies, promotional materials, utilities, organization fees, you know, if I'm involved in different clubs or you know, professional associations. And it gives you an idea of, geez, I'm not even, you know, talking about the time and everything that we're spending on work, but how much do we cost ourselves to basically consider this type of employment? So that's another little thing. And then another aspect of the class is pricing your work. So you know, it's a fun week, and I think Carol Riley was in the class last year, and I think she enjoyed it, really. So I was going to share my screen, and we're going to look at some jury shots that I have up. I think you guys can see that now, right? These
Yes.
are jury shots, and this is what we would traditionally throw out there if we were applying to a show. So normally it's 5 slides, and you know, our jury is going to look at these slides and judge us upon these slides, and you know, not too many more things. Maybe a simple one-liner. That's another thing that, you know, we've got to explain who we are in you know, a very short amount of time, so to speak. So they'll look at five slides, and then a little bit about our work, and then, you know, judge us into these shows or not. And you know, then it's kind of off to the races. So I wanted to share with you, this is one of my funnest little parts of the class is, you know, so with all this stuff to consider making, how do we put a price on our passion? You know, is it balance of self-respect and reality, or is it an exercise in greed? Because of course we'd all like to, you know, make as much money as we possibly can, right? Is that right? So, you know, the traditional model that you hear a lot of times from artists is you take your material cost and what you would like to make per hour, and this is your wholesale price, and then you double it for retail because it costs more to sell retail, you know, running out there doing shows of your own or doing your own studio sale. And, you know, after that, you look at the number and adjust it until it hits a realm of reality. You know, that's kind of one of the traditional models. And I went to a show and I talked to all these different people about how they price their work. Um, and some people would, you know, talk about process. Deborah Adelson at the time was doing acrylic and sterling, and she would try real hard to educate people on her, you know, process, that it wasn't easy to do and things like that. And then we get to another thing, which is open market analysis. These are comps. This is looking at other artists' work and just see if it is consistent, you know, price wise. Does it seem consistent with others similar to work, similar items of work? Analysis may be to ask a friend to price your work because that friend is, you know, in and out of galleries or boutiques all the time. I found that very handy. I had a friend of mine who all she wanted to do is go up and down Madison Avenue and shop. She wouldn't buy a lot, but she walked into my booth at a craft show and said, well, first of all, you got to raise all your prices. So that was kind of interesting. You can consult with a gallery owner to price your own work. And you use this as a starting point. You kind of, you know, take it all with a grain of salt, so to speak, and you can fall back on an original formula you had. You know, the nice thing is it's up to us. It's our game, so to speak. We can make the rule. So then I asked some artists, mainly gold jewelers in this instance. One said 4 to 6 times the material cost is a good basis for a retail number versus reality. So then again, they're throwing in comps and things like that. The consistency in the case, if you're selling a lot of work out of a case or at a show, are the prices consistent or are they all over the place? Do they leave people wondering, you know, why things are more expensive or why things are less expensive? I had one artist tell me, well, when I'm making stuff, I try to make $1,000 worth of stuff each day when I work. And, you know, I look at what I make at the end of the day and see if that kind of adds up. And then cost analysis is great, according to another friend of mine, but the reality is what the market will bear versus what I'm happy with. And just that word happy that comes up, you know, is really, that's a big part of it, because you got to make yourself happy. Whenever you sell work, if you feel underpriced, it really, you know, it doesn't feel good to undersell your work, does it? This is Ben Dyer, another friend of mine. And this is Tom Turner. I know this is the guy that said he tried to make $1,000 worth of stuff each day. Then you get into the other aspect of selling work when, you know, you're doing all these one-of-a-kinds and you're getting into shows and you're the deep into the pool person. And then you show up and you realize, oh, I can't just make a living off of these, you know, one-of-a-kind pieces. So you might start to produce a body of work that's more sellable, more, I guess, made in batches or formulaic, let's say. So production work is priced differently than the one-of-a-kind stuff. And I always say I'm not in a hurry to move the custom work because it takes so much time. It kind of becomes a calling card for you, and it breeds other stuff and kind of raises the bar for you. So I'm a big fan of, you know, if it looks expensive, leave it be expensive. You don't need to get rid of that so soon. You know, sell your lower end work, which is a little easier to make, a little easier on your body. There's nothing wrong with that. And then I take my, sometimes I take my material cost and my labor and I'll double that. And if that looks too expensive, it probably is. So we're back to comparing things. So as you can see, you know, it's a good mix between, you know, what you want and what things go for and really how busy you want to be. Do you want to just be selling work all the time, or do you want to hold on to some of the pieces, and when you sell them you feel like you hit the lottery? I price per certain object. Sometimes a great deal of engineering has to happen whenever you make a new piece. You know, they call that, you know, building your wings after you jump off the bridge. You're figuring it out. And this is a lot of time involved in some things. So, you know, with one of a kinds, that may take a long time to recoup. So here's a few more pictures of some artisans. Ayala Natali works in dyed coconut and silver. She has, I would say, no competition because she's the only one working that way. And she makes things in batches, and she has these little formulas that she does deviations on. I think that's a good way to think. This fella is more of a folk artist. He makes handmade instruments, and he's got his production work. These little these smaller pieces on the left. You know, he's got a formula for that, even though each one's a little bit different. And then his dulcimers on the right, you know, those are going to be $400, $500, $600. Here's an interesting guy, my friend Chuck. And it's interesting. One of those categories where nobody does this. This is a form of batik. It's actually old newspaper prints. If you look closely, you'll see newspaper, especially in the center of this one in that red disc. It's an antique newspaper print that he's done collages with and then sat there for hours and hours and hours and did these little dots all over these pieces. You know, you're not going to go out and compare his prices to anybody else just because there's nobody else, you know, doing this stuff. And there's some more of Chuck's work. Um, so the interesting thing is whenever I do this section on pricing, um, I hear everybody's formula. I've got my formula, and I talk to people about, well, how they're going to price their work, and everybody's kind of in a different boat as far as how much their studio costs, maybe how rare their craft is, maybe material cost, um, maybe what markets they're selling in. That's another thing. Are you doing street festivals, really cool kitschy things, Comic-Con, or are you doing, a museum show where the less amount of work you have in the booth, the better kind of deal. So, you kind of, I guess there's no rule, I would say, but after I spent all this time asking these people how they price their work, I came up with two winners. And the first winner was, I will pay dearly for my illusion of mobility. And I was like, what the hell does that mean? Well, this is Harvey, and it was his quote. And Harvey Greenwald is known as the elder statesman of leather. He does a lot of shows. He sells a lot of work. Mainly, he sells it himself. So it's from him to his customer. They call that warm hand to warm hand. There's no middleman. There's no gallery. And Harvey just said to me one day, he said, Wayne, I like to stay busy. I literally underprice my work, so I always sell it. I'm always selling work because I'm a good deal, I'm a good craftsman, and I like to be mobile. I like to travel. So when he says he pays dearly for his illusion of mobility, what he's saying is he's selling cheaply, he knows it, and he can keep it moving. He's got work always moving in and out of his hands, in and out of his booth. He's always changing his work. He's not tied to a gallery. He doesn't have to match a gallery price. And I consider this guy a guy who knows, because this picture was taken just a couple years ago. And this is the same guy, Harvey Greenwald, at the original Woodstock 1969, selling his work out of a cardboard box. Is that cool or what?
Wow. Yeah.
So that's original Harvey. And the other winner, whenever I say the winner is, of who's pricing, is what makes me happy. I think that is such a wonderful quote. It came from a fellow named Wee Watt, who worked in plastic and found object. His work didn't cost him a lot to make, but he just looked me square in the eye and he said, Wayne, whatever makes me happy. So I just thought that was a brilliant answer. And he said, you know what? I know when I sell myself too cheap, and I know when I'm asking too much for it. So I think it's great that as artisans we get to make our own game board. We can make our own rules to the game. We can break the rules if we want. There's very little that ties us down. Yes, if we're in a gallery, we shouldn't undercut the gallery if we're doing a sale in their town at an art show. But I just think it's a wonderful thing to be an artist, and the class does shed a light on some of the business things and just some of the things that are going to be expected of an artist and whenever they get out and show work, be it the artist statement or the high resolution images or whatever. So it's a fun class. You guys are welcome to stop in at period 5 tomorrow or the next day. And geez, that's about it, Linda. I think we're still within our time frame. So any questions for any of us?
I just have an announcement, and I want to get your reaction to the fact that Sugarloaf, one of the largest craft show engines in the country, has gone belly up. And for those people who, I've been sugar free for a long time, for many reasons. But the problem with that going bankrupt is that they actually said to artists who had paid for a year of Sugarloaf shows in advance of their declaration of bankruptcy, you got to sue me in bankruptcy court to get your money back. That's a pretty nasty environment for artists to face. You've got to pay for these big name shows up front, months and months before you have income. And Sugarloaf is probably one of the household names of large craft shows that people would recognize. You got any thoughts about that?
Yeah, it goes back to my original statement. You know, when I thought I was going to be an artist, it was going to be a surreal art experience. It's a real experience. And I was talking about this not long ago about, you know, we've had all of our shows canceled. Barb and I do 8 to 10, sometimes 12 shows a year. We were literally at Vero Beach Art Museum, set up doing a show. This is one of the top shows in Florida. And that was Friday. Friday at noon, the town was helping them put out the signs for parking. Friday at 3, the police showed up. And this is back in March. This is the day the president made the announcement, national emergency. That was at 3 o'clock. The promoter got into an argument with the police. They said, hey, there's no argument. Show's closed. So by 4 o'clock, the show was closed and we were told to leave. We had 2 more days to do the show. Now, that show handled it, I'd say, pretty gracefully. It was nasty, you know, but, you know, they're saying we're in the show next year. We have we got 1 day out of 3 to make money, and we actually made money that day. The ironic thing is we won an award that day for $1,200 for being us. And, you know, we got that money a couple of weeks later. But this thing with Sugarloaf, and, you know, some of the shows are giving us our money back, saying you're in next year. Some of the shows are not in the position to do that because a promoter, if they're a good promoter, they do promote, and the promotion costs money. And the shows that we're really getting closer to doing during this pandemic, if they canceled, well, you know, they had already spent the money on promotion. So I think they were just being honest and saying, look, we don't have it to give back to you. But we're going to do the best we can to move forward and, you know, say you're in the show later. With something like what Sugarloaf, I have to say, it's a pretty swarmy maneuver to accept booth fees and to accept application fees when they probably had a feeling in the back of their mind they were going to go out of business. So if I had to hit my bitch switch, which it's right there on the back of my head, you know, I know how to hit it and use it. I would attempt to do a chargeback, which is saying, okay, if I applied to that craft show with a credit card, I would contact my credit card handler and say, I purchased something, which was a booth, and I'm not getting what I paid for. So I would see if I could do a chargeback on them. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. But, you know, I honestly just find it to be a sign of the times. And, you know, the fine print is so fine for a reason. They know a lot of people don't read it. So that's my thoughts on Sugarloaf. And I think that 80% or more of the shows that we've had canceled or the promoters that we're dealing with have really tried to do this in a humane way, even though we're all losing money. So, you know, I could go on for an hour about this and give you all these different examples, but for the most part, there's different kind of shows out there. There's different kind of galleries out there. Some of these are nonprofits. They do good for the community. They try to make a little money. Some of these are sole proprietorships in corporations, and they're in it for profit. So when you apply to these shows, whether it's in a gallery or a nonprofit gallery or a for-profit show or nonprofit show, I think keep that in mind and know that, yeah, they're going to need to make money. You're going to need to make money or cover your tail. And without being real nasty with Sugarloaf, I'll say that. But I say, you know, a blind man on a fast horse could have seen that one coming from a mile away, because Sugarloaf as a show for the last, I guess, 10 or so years had become less of an art show and more of food, hot sauces, kettle corn, you know, looking for corporate sponsors. That's what they had to do to sell the booths whenever they rented out a big exhibition space like Timonium Fairground or Gaithersburg. So, you know, I know they have risk too, but our job as artists is to manage our risk, attempt to profit from our passion, but know, I guess, the business side of art. They call it the art business. They call it the music business because it's half business. And if you're not willing to go there, go get somebody that's willing to do it for you, or have that relationship with the galleries that are disappearing or the whatever else.
Thank you, Wayne. Appreciate it.
Got it.
Let me give you a heads up of good things to come for the gallery talks. Tomorrow night, Rebecca Quattrone Dreyer and Catherine LaPietra are doing a face-off about architectural and body adornment, one of my favorite topics because I work in both arenas. So we are talking with Rebecca, who is an established mosaic artist. She's studied in Italy. She's done lots of commissions. Her work can be interior or exterior. It's primarily three-dimensional, whether it's freestanding sculpture or relief sculpture. Catherine LaPietra comes to us from the theater. So her sense of body adornment is dramatic and somewhat theatrical. And they share so many things in common. I thought that it would be really fun for our audience who would not normally put these two people together to share some of the commonality in pattern making and color and texture. So there are speakers tomorrow night. Wednesday night, we are dealing with fiber and wearable art from Joanne Bost, Carly Miller, Nancy McKenzie, and Melissa Weaver Dunning. So that is our largest as far as the quartet of them dealing with fiber and wearables. On Thursday, we're going to have a very interesting duo with Phil Grout, who's one of our most popular instructors. His classes fill even in a season like this one. We had to hire him to teach all 3 weeks because he's such a popular instructor. Sasha Lane is new with us, but her work is so poignant. She has a very different sensibility as far as storytelling. And I think between the two of them, since Phil's been a photojournalist for decades, it's going to be a very interesting talk between the conceptual development of how to put a photograph together and the techniques that they're using, because Phil's using his cell phone a lot. So for those of you who are interested in upping your game, you can get a sneak preview into 2 photographers' lives and work without actually taking their class. This year, because the student art shows will be online for the rest of the summer, and we can't possibly put them together digitally in the last day of classes, Friday will be a free day. I hope you all prepare for the concerts and enjoy it. And then we will have a blanket email that goes out when the student art show is up and ready. But as students and as instructors, we want those works coming into Maria, and she will put together a student art show. It will be on our website for everybody to enjoy for the rest of this summer, and then it will be archived. And this is a first. So thanks very much for joining us for the gallery talks for 2020 vision. Our vision has been slightly impaired by the pandemic and the civil unrest, but we've been creative people inside this time frame. And I hope you are all inspired to go out and create. Thank you very much.